The clock struck midnight when Sarah Chen's motion sensor alert buzzed her phone. Through grainy night vision, she watched her neighbor Karen methodically dismantling the Christmas display that had taken weeks to perfect. But Karen didn't know about the hidden camera, or that Sarah's husband was a detective. As tinsel scattered across the frozen driveway and $1,000 LED lights disappeared into garbage bags, Sarah realized this wasn't just theft. This was war. And Karen had no idea she'd just handed Sarah the ammunition to destroy her perfect suburban facade forever. Sarah Chen had always believed that good neighbors were the foundation of a peaceful life. Standing in her front yard at 6 a.m. on December 15th, adjusting the final strand of lights on her elaborate Christmas display, she felt a deep satisfaction watching the neighborhood slowly wake up around her. Houses began to glow with warm kitchen lights, coffee brewing, children's voices carrying through thin suburban walls. The display had taken her and her husband Mike 3 weekends to complete. Every LED bulb was precisely positioned, every inflatable Santa and reindeer strategically placed for maximum visual impact. The centerpiece, a towering Christmas tree made entirely of cascading lights, stood 12 feet tall in their front yard, visible from 3 blocks away. It was her masterpiece. Her gift to the neighborhood, her way of bringing joy to everyone who passed by. "Looks incredible, honey," Mike called from the doorway, steam rising from his coffee mug. Even in his rumpled pajamas and bedhead, he looked every inch the seasoned detective he was. 23 years on the force had given him an easy confidence. A way of reading people that made him invaluable at work and occasionally annoying at home. "The HOA better not give us grief about the height," Sarah said, stepping back to admire her work. "I measured everything twice. We are within regulations." "Since when do you care about HOA regulations?" Mike grinned, knowing full well that Sarah had been fighting various neighborhood association battles for the past 5 years. The fence height dispute, the mailbox color controversy, the ongoing saga of Mrs. Patterson's decorative garden gnomes. Sarah was about to respond when she heard the distinctive click of high heels on pavement. Karen Whitmore was approaching. From across the street, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, her yoga outfit spotless and coordinated. At 42, Karen had the kind of manufactured perfection that came from expensive treatments and relentless self-maintenance. She was also the current HOA president, a position she'd campaigned for with the intensity of someone running for actual political office. "Sarah, darling," Karen's voice carried that particular tone, warm on the surface, razor-sharp underneath. "The display looks ambitious." "Thank you," Sarah replied carefully. She'd learned to be cautious around Karen. Their relationship had been steadily deteriorating ever since the Henderson property dispute 6 months ago, when Karen had tried to force the elderly couple next door to remove their vegetable garden for being aesthetically inconsistent with neighborhood standards. "I do hope you checked the electrical load calculations," Karen continued, her smile never wavering. "We wouldn't want any safety issues. The insurance implications alone." Mike appeared beside Sarah, his detective instincts clearly activated. "Everything's up to code, Karen. Had a licensed electrician install the new outlets last month." "Of course," Karen's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "I'm sure it's fine. Though I have to say, the height of that tree display might be pushing our visual pollution guidelines." "Visual pollution?" Sarah felt heat rising in her chest. "It's Christmas decorations, Karen. It's supposed to be joyful." "I'm just thinking of property values," Karen said smoothly. "Excessive displays can sometimes appear, well, tacky. But I'm sure you've considered that." The word tacky hung in the cold morning air like a slap. Sarah felt Mike's hand touch her elbow, a gentle warning. He knew her well enough to recognize the signs of an impending explosion. "I think it's beautiful," came a voice from behind them. Mrs. Henderson was walking her ancient golden retriever, moving slowly but deliberately toward them. At 83, she was one of the neighborhood's longest residents and had watched Karen's rise to power with increasing disapproval. "Reminds me of the displays we used to have when I was young. Before everything became so regulated." Karen's smile became strained. "Of course, Mrs. Henderson. Everyone's entitled to their opinion." "Indeed they are," Mrs. Henderson replied, her voice carrying decades of authority. "Sarah, would you mind if I brought my grandchildren by this evening? They are visiting from Portland and I know they'd love to see the lights." "Of course." Sarah's irritation with Karen melted into genuine warmth. "Bring them anytime. I'll make sure everything's lit up." Karen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, I should get to my morning run. Sarah, I'll be in touch about the height variance. Just a formality, you understand." As Karen clicked away on her designer running shoes, Mrs. Henderson shook her head. That woman, she muttered. Always stirring up trouble. You watch yourself, dear. She's been making noise about several properties lately. What kind of noise? Mike asked, his cop instincts fully engaged. Oh, violations here and there. Trying to build cases for forced improvements. The Johnsons got cited for their fence stain being inconsistent. The Patels are fighting a battle over their garden stones. Mrs. Henderson's expression darkened. She's methodical about it. Builds documentation, takes photos, gets everything official. Then she strikes. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December morning. Strikes how? Fines. Liens. Legal action if necessary. She's forced 3 families to make expensive changes in the past year alone. Mrs. Henderson leaned closer. Word is she's trying to flip her own house next spring. Having the neighborhood perfected would increase her property value considerably. Mike and Sarah exchanged glances. This was news to them, but it explained a lot about Karen's recent aggressive stance on neighborhood issues. Thanks for the heads up, Sarah said. Just watch yourselves, Mrs. Henderson warned. Your display is beautiful, but it's also a target. She'll find a way to attack it if she can. As the elderly woman continued her walk, Sarah looked back at her Christmas display with new eyes. What had felt like a gift to the neighborhood suddenly felt like a declaration of war. We should document everything, Mike said quietly. Photos, receipts, permits. If she's building a case, we need to build one too. Sarah nodded, but part of her rebelled against the idea. Why should she have to turn Christmas decorations into a legal battle? Why couldn't Karen just let people enjoy the holidays? The rest of the morning passed peacefully. Sarah went to work at the marketing firm where she'd been a senior designer for 8 years, trying to push thoughts of Karen and HOA battles out of her mind. But she found herself distracted, sketching Christmas trees in the margins of her meeting. Notes, thinking about property values and neighborhood politics. Mike called during lunch. I did some checking on our friend Karen, he said. She's been busy. Filed complaints on 6 different properties in the past 4 months. All of them resulted in forced compliance or fines. 6. Sarah felt her stomach drop. That's a lot. It's systematic. She's not just being picky, she's building a track record. Makes any future complaints look more legitimate. Mike paused. I also found something interesting. She's been taking a lot of photos around the neighborhood. Posted some on social media with complaints about declining standards. Sarah's blood ran cold. Photos of our house? Not yet. But I think we should be prepared. That evening, Sarah stood in her front yard as the sun set, watching her Christmas display come to life. The lights were programmed to start at dusk, creating a magical cascade of color that transformed her modest suburban home into something extraordinary. The LED tree pulsed gently, cycling through warm whites and soft blues. The inflatable decorations glowed from within, and the icicle lights along the roofline created the illusion of a fairy tale cottage. Mrs. Henderson arrived with her grandchildren right on schedule. 2 little girls, maybe 7 and 9, pressed their faces against the fence and gasped in wonder. It's like Frozen, the younger one squealed. It's even better than Frozen, the older girl said solemnly. This is real. Sarah's heart swelled. This was why she'd spent 3 weekends climbing ladders and untangling lights. This was why she'd argued with Mike about the electric bill. For moments like this, when magic felt real and the world felt good. Other neighbors began to appear. The Johnsons from 2 houses down brought their teenage son, who was pretending to be too cool for Christmas lights but couldn't hide his smile. The new couple from the corner house, Sarah still didn't know their names, walked by twice, clearly making excuses to see the display again. Even cars began to slow down. A pickup truck pulled over, and a family of 4 got out to take photos. Sarah waved from her front steps, feeling like she was hosting the neighborhood's Christmas party. But then she noticed the sleek black BMW parked across the street. Karen sat in the driver's seat, her phone raised, clearly taking photos or video. She wasn't even trying to hide it. Mike, Sarah called softly. Her husband appeared beside her, following her gaze. I see her, he said grimly. She's D. 3 days after Karen's surveillance session, the official notice arrived in Sarah's mailbox. The envelope bore the Maple Meadows Homeowners Association letterhead, thick cardstock that announced its importance before Sarah even opened it. Mike found her standing in the kitchen at 7 a.m., the letter spread across the granite counter, her coffee growing cold as she read the same paragraphs over and over. Violation notice, Mike read aloud, looking over her shoulder. Display height variance. Electrical load concerns, visual impact assessment required. He whistled low. She's thorough. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she held the document. The language was dense, legalistic, designed to intimidate. But what struck her most was the precision of it. Karen had measured everything, the exact height of the lead tree, 12 feet, 3 inches, the number of electrical connections, 17, even the lumens output of the display, estimated at 47,000. This wasn't a casual complaint. This was a calculated attack. Look at this, Sarah pointed to a paragraph halfway down the page. She's requiring a certified structural engineer to assess the ground stability under the tree display. That's going to cost us $1,500 minimum. And this electrical inspection, Mike added, scanning the requirements. From a licensed contractor, not the guy who installed our outlets. Another 1,000, easy. Sarah felt her chest tighten. They could afford the inspections, but that wasn't the point. Karen was weaponizing bureaucracy, using the HOA's authority to make their Christmas display so expensive and complicated that they'd have no choice but to take it down. There's more, Mike said grimly. He flipped to the second page, where Karen had attached photographs. Professional quality images taken from multiple angles, complete with measuring tape visible in several shots. She's been planning this for weeks. The photos showed the display from every conceivable angle. Ground level. Shots that made the tree appear towering and imposing. Wide shots that made it look out of proportion with the house. Even close-ups of individual electrical connections, circled in red ink with handwritten notes about potential fire hazards. She's good, Sarah admitted reluctantly. Evil, but good. The worst part was the timeline. All inspections had to be completed within 10 days, or the display would be considered in violation and subject to immediate removal. December 18th to December 28th, right through Christmas. She's trying to kill Christmas, Sarah said flatly. Mike's phone buzzed. A text from their next-door neighbor, Janet Morrison. Did you get one too? Sarah and Mike exchanged glances. One what? Mike texted back. HOA violation notice. Mine's about my wreath being commercially excessive. Want to come over? They found Janet in her kitchen, her own violation notice spread across the breakfast table. At 62, Janet was a retired teacher who'd spent the past 15 years perfecting her holiday decorating. Her wreath was indeed large, 4 feet across, covered in handmade ornaments that represented different countries she'd visited. It was beautiful, personal, and completely harmless. 24-inch maximum diameter, Janet read from her notice. Mine's 48 inches. Apparently, it's creating a visual distraction that could impact traffic safety. She looked up at them with disbelief. It's been hanging there for 3 weeks. Has anyone crashed into anything? This is insane, Sarah said, but even as she spoke, she realized it was actually quite sane. Methodical. Strategic. She's not just going after us. She's going after everyone who might support us. Mike's detective brain was working overtime. Janet, have you had any run-ins with Karen recently? Any reason she'd target you specifically? Janet's expression darkened. The Henderson situation. I spoke up at the HOA meeting when she tried to force them to remove their vegetable garden. Called her out for harassment. She paused. I also may have mentioned that she seemed more interested in property values than community values. So this is retaliation, Sarah said. Systematic retaliation, Mike corrected. She's isolating you by going after your allies first. Sarah's phone rang. Mrs. Henderson's voice was shaky when she answered. Sarah, dear, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I think I need help. I've received a notice from the HOA about my garden. They are calling it a non-conforming agricultural use and saying I need to remove it or face legal action. Sarah felt her blood pressure spike. We'll be right over. Mrs. Henderson's house was a modest ranch style that had been her home for 47 years. The vegetable garden that Karen was targeting occupied a small corner of the backyard, barely visible from the street. It was where Mrs. Henderson grew tomatoes, peppers, and herbs, partly for the fresh food, partly for the satisfaction of nurturing something to life. I don't understand, Mrs. Henderson said, her voice smaller than Sarah had ever heard it. I've been gardening here since 1976. No one ever complained before. The violation notice was similar to theirs but more vicious. It classified the garden as a commercial agricultural operation and demanded immediate removal of all non-ornamental vegetation. The language was harsh, almost cruel in its clinical precision. She's targeting everyone who stood up to her, Sarah said, the full scope of Karen's plan becoming clear. She's not just going after Christmas decorations or vegetables. She's going after dissent. Mike studied the notice carefully. There's something else. Look at the signature line. At the bottom of each violation notice, Karen had signed not just as HOA president, but as acting on behalf of Maple Meadows Property Management LLC. Sarah had never heard of that company. I'll run a search on this property management company, Mike said. Something feels off. That evening, Sarah stood in her front yard as the Christmas lights came on, but the magic was gone. The display that had brought her such joy now felt like a target painted on her house. Worse, she could see the real damage Karen was doing. The neighborhood felt different, tense, suspicious, divided. The Johnsons walked by but didn't stop to chat. The new couple from the corner house crossed the street to avoid passing directly in front of Sarah's house. Even the kids seemed subdued, as if they sensed the adult conflict poisoning the air. This is what she wanted, Sarah said when Mike joined her. Not just to take down our decorations. To break up the neighborhood. To make everyone too scared to come together. Mike's research had revealed disturbing information. Maple Meadows Property Management LLC was incorporated 6 weeks ago. Guess who the sole owner is? Sarah didn't need to guess. Karen. She's created a shell company to give her actions legal legitimacy. Every violation notice, every fine, every forced improvement, it's all going through her company. She's not just the HOA president. She's positioning herself as the neighborhood's property manager. That's got to be illegal, Sarah said. It's ethically questionable, but probably legal. She's been smart about it. No outright fraud, no clear conflicts of interest. Just good old-fashioned manipulation of the system. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. Not break, crack. Like ice under pressure, holding together but fundamentally weakened. She's going to win, isn't she? She's going to force everyone to comply or move away, and then she'll have her perfect neighborhood for her perfect property sale. Maybe, Mike said quietly. But there's something she doesn't know about us. What's that? Mike smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile he wore when he was about to make an arrest. I've been a cop for 23 years. I know how bullies operate. And I know how they fall. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Mrs. Henderson's shaky voice, Janet's bewildered anger, the way the neighborhood was retreating into itself. Karen was winning through fear and bureaucracy, and Sarah felt powerless to stop it. At 2 a.m., she got up and looked out the window at her Christmas display. The lights were still on, still beautiful, but they felt defiant now rather than joyful. A declaration of war rather than a gift of peace. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, "Your display is lovely. Don't let her win." A friend. Sarah stared at the message, wondering who had sent it. Someone else who was tired of Karen's reign of terror. Someone who'd been targeted but hadn't spoken up. The neighborhood was full of people who were probably fed up but too scared to say anything. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe Karen's strength, her ability to isolate and intimidate, was also her weakness. She'd made a lot of enemies. She'd pushed too hard, too fast, against too many people. Sarah looked back at her Christmas display, and for the first time in 3 days, she smiled. Karen thought she was fighting a battle against Christmas decorations and vegetable gardens and oversized wreaths. But she wasn't. She was fighting a battle against community, against neighbors caring about each other, against the idea that some things mattered more than property values. And that was a battle Karen could lose. The next morning, Sarah made a decision. She wasn't going to take down her display. She wasn't going to pay for Karen's demanded inspections. She was going to fight back, and she was going to win. But first, she needed to understand exactly who she was fighting. And Mike, with his detective resources and his understanding of how systems worked, was going to help her do it. Karen Whitmore thought she was dealing with a suburban housewife who'd cave under pressure. She had no idea she was about to face a woman who'd decided that some battles W. Sarah's declaration of war began quietly, with coffee and whispered conversations. The morning after receiving Karen's violation notice, she knocked on Janet Morrison's door with a thermos of Colombian blend and a folder full of documents. "I've been thinking about what you said," Sarah began, settling into Janet's kitchen chair. "About Karen targeting people who opposed her. What if we are not the only ones?" Janet poured the coffee into mismatched mugs, one from her teaching days, another from a long-ago vacation to Maine. "I've been thinking the same thing. Marge Patterson mentioned something about a citation for her garden gnomes. And the Kowalskis got something about their fence height. Mike's been doing some digging, Sarah said, opening her folder. Karen's violation notices go back further than we thought. She's been systematically targeting people for 8 months. Not 4. And the pattern is always the same: find a technical violation, demand expensive compliance, isolate the troublemakers. Janet studied the timeline Mike had constructed. Names, dates, violation types, outcomes. 15 families in total, most of whom had eventually complied rather than fight. It's like she's been conducting a social experiment. How much pressure can she apply before people break? Or move away, Sarah added. 3 of these families sold their houses in the past 6 months. The Hendersons are talking about it now. Janet's expression hardened. That's exactly what she wants. Get rid of the old-timers, the people who remember when this was a neighborhood instead of a property investment. Sarah leaned forward. Mike thinks we can build a case against her. Not just individually, but as a group. Show a pattern of harassment. Abuse of authority, conflict of interest with a property management company. What do you need? Names. Contact information. People who've been targeted but might be afraid to speak up alone. Sarah paused. And we need to be careful. If Karen finds out we are organizing, she'll escalate. Janet smiled grimly. Sarah, dear, I taught high school for 35 years. I know how to run an underground resistance. Over the next 3 days, Janet's network of retired teachers, longtime neighbors and concerned parents quietly made contact. The results were more extensive than Sarah had imagined. Karen's reach extended to 22 families, with violation notices ranging from the petty, incorrect mailbox reflector tape to the devastating, forced roof replacement for aesthetic inconsistency. The most shocking revelation came from David Kowalski, whose fence violation had cost him $8,000 in legal fees and replacement materials. She had a surveyor come out, he told Sarah and Janet during a clandestine meeting in Sarah's kitchen. Measured everything twice. Turns out our fence was exactly where it had been for 12 years, but somehow the property line had been clarified in a recent survey. Clarified how? Sarah asked. Karen had requested a new survey through the city planning department. Said there were discrepancies in the original plat. The new survey moved the property line 3 inches, making our fence technically on city easement land. Sarah felt a chill. She manipulated the survey. Not manipulated. Requested. All. Perfectly legal. But she knew exactly what she was doing. David's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd fought and lost. Cost us $8,000 to move the fence. Karen was very sympathetic, of course. Said she was just following city regulations. The pattern was becoming clear. Karen didn't just find violations, she created them. She researched city codes, property records, and historical documents until she found leverage points. Then she applied pressure systematically, professionally, until people either complied or left. She's not just a power-hungry HOA president. Sarah told Mike that evening. She's running a sophisticated operation to remake the entire neighborhood. Mike spread the case files across their dining room table. It's actually brilliant, in a sociopathic way. She's using legitimate channels to accomplish illegitimate goals. Every action she takes is technically legal, but the cumulative effect is harassment. Can we stop her? Maybe. But we need more than just documentation. We need to catch her in an actual crime, something that goes beyond aggressive interpretation of HOA rules. Sarah stared at the files, thinking. What if we don't wait for her to commit a crime? What if we make her commit one? Mike looked up sharply. Sarah, what are you thinking? She's methodical, right? She builds cases, documents everything, waits for the right moment to strike. But what if we made her so frustrated, so desperate to win, that she makes a mistake? You want to bait her. I want to make her show her true colors. Right now, she's hiding behind bureaucracy and legal technicalities. But underneath all that, she's just a bully. And bullies always overreach when they are challenged. Mike was quiet for a long moment. That's dangerous, Sarah. If you push her too hard, she might do something really damaging. She's already doing something damaging. She's destroying our neighborhood, one violation notice at a time. At least this way, we control the terms of engagement. The next morning, Sarah began her campaign with a simple act of defiance. Instead of scheduling the required inspections for her Christmas display, she added more decorations. A second LED tree, matching the first. Additional light strands along the fence line. A family of inflatable snowmen that hadn't been there the week before. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Her display went from impressive to spectacular, visible from 4 blocks away. Cars began stopping regularly, families getting out to take photos. The local news station sent a crew to film a segment about Maple Street's Christmas miracle. Karen's response was swift and predictable. A new violation notice arrived within 48 hours, this one threatening immediate legal action. The language was harsher, more aggressive, barely concealing the fury beneath the bureaucratic prose. "Good," Sarah said, reading the notice aloud to Mike. "She's losing control." But Sarah's real strategy was more subtle. She wasn't just provoking Karen, she was providing an example. If one neighbor could stand up to the HOA's intimidation, maybe others would find the courage to do the same. The first ally emerged unexpectedly. On December 21st, Mrs. Henderson replanted her vegetable garden, adding twice as many tomato plants as before. She also put up a small sign, "Community Garden. All welcome." Janet Morrison replaced her oversized wreath with an even larger one, this one decorated with small American flags and a banner reading, "Land of the Free, Home of the Brave." The Kowalskis, emboldened by the growing resistance, painted their fence bright blue, technically within HOA color guidelines, but so vibrant it could be seen from space. Each act of defiance brought a new violation notice, but also brought the neighbors closer together. The underground network Janet had built was becoming visible, open, united in their refusal to be intimidated. Karen's response escalated proportionally. Violation notices became daily occurrences. She began showing up at houses with a measuring tape and camera, documenting infractions in real time. She filed complaints with the city about noise violations, zoning issues, and property maintenance. "She's panicking," Mike observed, watching Karen take photographs of their house from 3 different angles. "Look at her body language. She's not methodical anymore. She's desperate." Sarah felt a mixture of satisfaction and unease. Her plan was working, Karen was losing her composure, making mistakes, overreaching. But the collateral damage was increasing. The neighborhood was becoming a battleground, with families choosing sides and normal life grinding to a halt. The breaking point came on December 23rd. Sarah was in her kitchen, preparing dinner, when she heard shouting from the street. Through the window, she saw Karen confronting Mrs. Henderson in the elderly woman's front yard, waving a stack of papers and gesturing angrily at the vegetable garden. "This is harassment." Mrs. Henderson's voice carried across the street. "You can't just show up at my house demanding I destroy my garden." "I'm enforcing community standards," Karen shot back, but her usual composure was cracking. "Standards that everyone agreed to when they bought their houses. I bought my house in 1976. Before you were born. Before your precious HOA existed." Sarah grabbed her jacket and headed for the door, but Mike caught her arm. "Wait," he said quietly. "Look." Other neighbors were emerging from their houses. Janet Morrison. The Kowalskis. The Johnsons. Even some families Sarah didn't recognize. They weren't saying anything, just standing in their yards, watching. Karen seemed to realize she was being observed. Her voice dropped, but Sarah could still hear her through the window. "Mrs. Henderson, I don't want to make this unpleasant. But the rules are the rules. Your garden is in violation, and if you don't comply voluntarily, I'll have to pursue legal remedies." "Legal remedies?" Mrs. Henderson's voice shook, but with anger rather than fear. "You mean you'll try to steal my house over a tomato plant?" "I mean I'll protect property values for everyone in this neighborhood." "Property values?" Mrs. Henderson repeated, her voice carrying decades of accumulated authority. "Let me tell you something about property values, young lady. Do you know what really destroys property values? Neighbors who can't trust each other. Communities where people are afraid to be themselves. Neighborhoods where one person gets to decide what's acceptable for everyone else." The watching neighbors began to move closer, not threatening, but present. United. Care. Christmas Eve arrived with an unusual warmth, as if the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. Sarah spent the morning making final adjustments to her display, but her mind wasn't on the decorations. It was on the small, nearly invisible camera Mike had installed 3 days earlier, nestled behind the decorative garland on their front porch. "Motion-activated, infrared-capable, streams directly to your phone," Mike had explained as he positioned the device. "If Karen tries anything, we'll have her." Sarah had insisted on a second camera, this one hidden in the lead tree itself, disguised as just another light fixture. "She's smart," Sarah had argued. "She'll check for obvious surveillance. But she won't expect us to be this thorough." Now, as evening approached, Sarah felt the weight of anticipation. Karen had been eerily quiet since the confrontation with Mrs. Henderson 2 days ago. No new violation notices, no drive-by photography sessions, no aggressive encounters. The silence felt more threatening than her previous harassment. She's planning something, Sarah told Mike as they watched the neighborhood settle into Christmas Eve routines. Families hurried home with last-minute gifts, children pressed faces against windows waiting for Santa, the usual magic of the holiday trying to assert itself despite the underlying tension. Maybe she's given up, Mike suggested, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it any more than Sarah did. Karen doesn't give up. She escalates. At 9 p.m., Sarah activated her Christmas display for what she suspected might be the last time. The lights cascaded across the front yard in waves of color, the LED trees pulsing gently, the inflatable decorations glowing with warm internal light. Despite everything that had happened, despite the violation notices and the neighborhood warfare, the display was still beautiful. Still magical. Cars slowed as they passed, families pointing and smiling. Children pressed against backseat windows, their faces lit by reflected colors. For a moment, Sarah felt the original joy she'd intended to share, the simple pleasure of bringing light to the darkness. But she also felt the weight of the cameras, the knowledge that beauty was being used as bait, that Christmas magic was about to become evidence in a criminal case. At 10:30, Mike's phone buzzed with a text from dispatch. Domestic disturbance. On Elm Street. Need backup. Sarah looked at him sharply. Tonight. On Christmas Eve. Crime doesn't take holidays, Mike said, but he was already reaching for his badge and gun. I'll be back as soon as I can. Keep your phone on, watch the camera feeds. Mike, what if this isn't a coincidence? What if Karen's manipulative, but she's not psychic? She can't predict police calls. He kissed her forehead. I'll be back in an hour, maybe less. Just stay inside and let the cameras do their work. Sarah watched his patrol car disappear around the corner, then settled into the living room with her laptop open to the camera feeds. The infrared images showed her front yard in stark black and white, the decorations reduced to geometric shapes and shadows. Motion-activated alerts were set to ping her phone, but she kept the screens active anyway, watching for any movement. 11 p.m. passed quietly. Then 11:30. Sarah found herself fighting drowsiness, the warmth of the house and the stress of the past weeks finally catching up with her. She made coffee, checked the feeds again, sent Mike a text asking for an update. No response. At 11:45, her phone buzzed with a motion alert. Sarah's heart jumped as she looked at the screen, but it was just a cat walking through the yard, its eyes glowing white in the infrared image. False alarm. She was beginning to wonder if her suspicions were wrong, if Karen had indeed backed down, when she heard a car door close somewhere nearby. Not in front of her house, the sound was muffled, distant, like someone parking several houses away. Sarah checked the camera feeds again. Nothing. But the sound had been real, she was sure of it. And on Christmas Eve, at nearly midnight, who was arriving in the neighborhood? Her phone showed no new messages from Mike. The domestic disturbance was taking longer than expected. At 11:58, another motion alert. This time, Sarah's blood ran cold. A figure was moving across her front yard, but not walking normally. Hunched over, moving deliberately from decoration to decoration, carrying what looked like garbage bags. The infrared image was clear enough to show the person's general shape and size, but not detailed enough to identify them definitively. Sarah's hands shook as she switched to the second camera, the one hidden in the LED tree. The angle was different, closer to the ground, and she could see the intruder more clearly. Female, average height, wearing dark clothing and what looked like a knit cap pulled low over her face. She was systematically disconnecting the electrical connections on the inflatable decorations, deflating them one by one and stuffing them into large garbage bags. Karen. Sarah's first instinct was to run outside, to confront the thief directly. But Mike's training had rubbed off on her over the years. Evidence first, confrontation second. She needed to let Karen incriminate herself fully before taking action. She watched in fascination and horror as Karen worked with methodical precision. This wasn't vandalism or a crime of passion. This was a planned operation, executed with the same attention to detail Karen brought to her violation notices. She had wire cutters for the electrical connections, folded garbage bags for efficient transport, even what looked like a small flashlight with a red filter to preserve her night vision. The LED trees were more challenging. Karen spent several minutes examining the base of the first one, looking for the power connection. When she found it, she didn't just unplug it, she cut the cord entirely, making the damage permanent. Sarah's anger shifted into something colder, more calculating. Karen wasn't just stealing decorations. She was ensuring they could never be replaced, never be used again. This was destruction masquerading as theft. The second lead tree fell to the same treatment. Then the icicle lights along the roofline, though Karen had to use a small ladder she'd apparently brought for that purpose. She worked quickly but carefully, avoiding the main motion sensor light while staying in the shadows cast by the house. Sarah's phone showed 12:17 a.m. Christmas Day. Karen was literally stealing Christmas. But she was also providing irrefutable evidence of multiple felonies. Theft, destruction of property, trespassing, and given the electrical components involved. Probably some form of criminal mischief that would push the charges into more serious territory. Sarah had her evidence, but she also had a problem. Mike wasn't answering his phone, and Karen was about to escape with several $1,000s worth of stolen decorations. Should she call 911? Confront Karen herself? Wait for Mike to return? The decision was made for her when Karen moved toward the final piece of the display, the large inflatable Santa that had been Sarah's favorite, the one that had drawn so many delighted children to the yard over the past weeks. As Karen began disconnecting the power cord, Sarah saw something that made her blood boil. Karen was smiling. Not just focused or determined, but actually enjoying herself. She was savoring the destruction, taking pleasure in dismantling something that had brought joy to so many people. Sarah grabbed her phone and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Sarah Chen at 1247 Maple Street. There's someone in my yard stealing my Christmas decorations. I have video evidence and she's still here. We'll send an officer right away. Are you in a safe location? I'm inside my house, watching through security cameras. The thief is still actively stealing items from my front yard. Do not confront the individual. Stay inside until officers arrive. Can you describe the person? Sarah looked at the camera feed, where Karen was now struggling with the inflatable Santa. Female, about 5'6", wearing dark clothing and a knit cap. She is professional. Equipment, wire cutters, a ladder, multiple garbage bags. This isn't random vandalism. This is a planned theft. Officers are en route. Stay on the line with me. Sarah watched as Karen finished with the Santa and moved toward the house, apparently looking for more items to steal. The decorative garland around the front door caught her attention, and she began pulling it down, not caring that she was damaging the doorframe in the process. She's moved to my front door, Sarah told the dispatcher. She's damaging my property to steal decorations. How long has this been going on? Sarah checked her phone. About 20 minutes. But she's been methodical about it. She's stolen probably $3,000 worth of decorations. I need you to stay inside. Do not, Sarah's front door rattled. Karen was trying the handle. She's trying to get inside my house, Sarah said, her voice sharp with sudden fear. She's attempting to enter my home. Officers are 2 minutes out. Stay on the line, stay away from the door. Sarah backed away from the front windows, her heart pounding. This had gone beyond theft. Karen was now attempting breaking and entering, escalating from property crime to something much more serious. The door handle rattled again, more aggressively. Then Sarah heard a new sound, something metallic being inserted into the lock. Karen was trying to pick the lock. She's trying to break into my house, Sarah told the dispatcher. She has some kind of tool, she's working on the lock. Officers are pulling onto your street now. Stay away from the door. Sarah could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer. But she could also hear Karen's lockpicking. Detective Mike Chen arrived home at 1:47 a.m. to find his front yard cordoned off with police tape and his wife giving a statement to Officer Rodriguez from the Maple Meadows Police Department. The domestic disturbance call that had taken him away had been a false alarm, a neighbor reporting shouting that turned out to be teenagers playing video games too loudly. But the timing felt too convenient, too perfect, for coincidence. She planned this, Sarah said when Mike pulled her aside. The call that took you away, the late hour, everything. She's been watching our patterns for weeks. Mike looked at the devastation of their front yard. The systematic destruction was obvious even in the darkness. Show me the footage. They huddled around Sarah's laptop as the infrared video played. Mike's expression grew darker with each frame, his detective training cataloging every crime, every piece of evidence, every legal ramification. Premeditated theft, destruction of property, attempted breaking and entering, possession of burglary. Tools, he muttered. She brought a lockpick set, Sarah. This isn't harassment anymore. This is multiple felonies. Can we get her? We can destroy her. Mike's voice carried the cold satisfaction of a cop who'd finally caught a criminal red-handed. This video is admissible evidence. Her face is clearly visible, the crimes are obvious, and the premeditation is undeniable. Any prosecutor would love this case. Officer Rodriguez joined them. Mrs. Chen, we've checked the immediate area. No sign of the suspect, but we found several items in the alley behind Henderson's house. He gestured toward a pile of deflated decorations and tangled lights. Looks like she dumped some of the stolen property when she heard our sirens. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and rage. Some of her decorations were recoverable, but the damage was extensive. Electrical cords had been cut, not just unplugged. Inflatable decorations had been slashed. The lead trees were completely destroyed. We'll need you to come in tomorrow, later today, to file formal charges, Rodriguez continued. With this video evidence, we should have an arrest warrant by noon. As the police finished their investigation and left, Sarah stood in her ravaged front yard with Mike, looking at the remnants of her Christmas display. The magic was gone, but something else had taken its place. A sense of completion. Of justice. Served. She finally showed her true colors, Sarah said quietly. No more hiding behind HOA regulations and property management companies. No more pretending to be the victim. She's just a criminal now. Mike put his arm around her. You realize what this means, don't you? It's not just about the theft. Once this goes public, her entire harassment campaign will be exposed. Every violation notice, every intimidation tactic, every family she's driven out of the neighborhood, it all becomes part of a pattern of criminal behavior. Sarah felt a grim satisfaction. Karen had destroyed Christmas decorations, but in doing so, she destroyed herself. Christmas morning arrived gray and cold, matching the mood on Maple Street. Word of Karen's arrest had spread quickly through the neighborhood's informal networks. By 8 a.m., a steady stream of neighbors was walking by Sarah's house, some offering condolences, others sharing their own stories of Karen's harassment. Mrs. Henderson arrived with a thermos of hot chocolate and a determined expression. I want to press charges too, she announced. Not just about the garden violations. About the harassment, the intimidation, the systematic campaign to drive me out of my home. Janet Morrison joined them, carrying a folder thick with documentation. I've been talking to the other families she targeted. We want to file a class action lawsuit. Civil rights violations, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Make her pay for what she's done to this neighborhood. Sarah felt a surge of pride. The community that Karen had tried to divide and intimidate was finally coming together, united in their determination to hold her accountable. The arrest happened at 11:30 a.m. on Christmas Day. Sarah watched from her front window as two police cars pulled up to Karen's house. The woman who emerged from the front door bore little resemblance to the polished HOA president who had terrorized the neighborhood for months. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, her face haggard with exhaustion and fear. She didn't resist arrest, but she also didn't show any remorse. Even as the handcuffs clicked into place, her expression remained defiant, contemptuous, as if she still believed she was the victim of some elaborate conspiracy. She still doesn't get it, Mike observed. She still thinks she was in the right. The full scope of Karen's downfall became clear over the following days. The video evidence was leaked to local media, showing the methodical destruction of Christmas decorations by the neighborhood's HOA president. The story went viral within hours, spreading across social media with hashtags like #KarenStoleChristmas and #HOAFromHell. But the real damage came when investigative reporters began digging into Karen's background. The shell company she'd created to legitimize her harassment campaign was exposed as a fraud. The property surveys she'd commissioned were revealed to have conflicts of interest. The systematic pattern of targeting dissenting neighbors was laid out in devastating detail. Her real estate license was suspended pending investigation. Her property management company was dissolved. The house she'd been planning to flip became unsellable, its value plummeting as the story spread. Most damaging of all was the revelation that came from Mike's police investigation. Karen's house was scheduled for foreclosure. She was heavily in debt, leveraged to the breaking point on her renovation project. The harassment campaign hadn't been about neighborhood standards or property values, it had been about desperation. She'd been trying to drive out longtime residents and remake the neighborhood quickly enough to sell her house before losing everything. She was never the successful real estate mogul she pretended to be, Mike explained to Sarah as they read the morning headlines. She was broke, desperate, and willing to destroy other people's lives to save her own financial skin. The legal consequences were swift and severe. Multiple felony charges for the theft and attempted breaking and entering. Civil lawsuits from 15 different families. An investigation by the state's HOA Oversight Board that revealed numerous violations of her fiduciary duties as president. But perhaps the most satisfying consequence was the immediate change in the neighborhood's atmosphere. Without Karen's intimidation tactics, families began emerging from their shells. Decorations went back up. Mrs. Henderson's vegetable garden was expanded into a true community space. The Kowalskis threw a New Year's party that brought together neighbors who hadn't spoken in months. Sarah rebuilt her Christmas display, but she also did something else. She organized the neighborhood's first annual Light Up Maple Street celebration, turning what had been her personal project into a community-wide event. Every house participated in some way, and the result was more magical than anything she could have created alone. On New Year's Eve, as Sarah stood in her front yard surrounded by neighbors and friends, she felt a deep sense of completion. The Christmas lights twinkled around them, reflecting off the snow that had finally arrived. Children ran between the houses, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. Adults chatted over cups of hot cider, sharing stories and making plans for the coming year. "You did it," Mike said, joining her in the middle of the celebration. "You saved the neighborhood." Sarah shook her head. "We all did it." Karen thought she could divide us, intimidate us, make us afraid of each other. But she just reminded us why community matters. Across the street, Karen's house stood dark and empty. The foreclosure notice had been posted the week before, and she'd moved out quietly in the middle of the night, avoiding the media attention and neighborhood hostility that had made her life unbearable. Her reign of terror had lasted 8 months. Her downfall had taken 8 minutes of security camera footage. "What do you think happened to her?" Sarah asked. Mike shrugged. "She'll probably end up in another neighborhood, in another state, trying the same tactics on new victims. People like Karen don't change. They just find new targets. Not if word gets out. Not if people know what to watch for." Sarah was right. The story of Karen's harassment campaign had become a cautionary tale, shared in HOA meetings and neighborhood forums across the country. The tactics that had seemed so sophisticated, so unbeatable, were revealed to be predictable and ultimately self-defeating. Bullies always overreach. Tyrants always make mistakes. And communities, when they finally come together, are stronger than any individual who tries to tear them apart. As the New Year's celebration continued around them, Sarah looked up at her rebuilt Christmas display. The lights seemed brighter now, more meaningful. They weren't just decorations anymore. They were symbols of resilience, of community, of the simple truth that light always triumphs over darkness. Karen Whitmore had tried to steal Christmas, but in the end, she'd only made it stronger. The neighborhood she'd tried to control had found its voice, its strength, its unity. And on Maple Street, Christmas would shine brighter than ever before. The hidden camera that had captured Karen's midnight theft was now a permanent fixture, a silent guardian protecting the community that had learned to protect itself. Because the best defense against tyranny isn't just evidence, it's nag.